Hey church, and welcome to this week's small group. Now this last Sunday we talked about how God has given us the gift of the Holy Spirit. And we may know the truth about the Holy Spirit, but sometimes we tend to think of the Holy Spirit in a different way. And so when you think of the Holy Spirit, do you tend to think more of a spiritual force, or do you think of a person? And the second question, how have you experienced the Holy Spirit in your life? Now, we know that the Holy Spirit is a person. He's not some kind of a spiritual force. But I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes I still think of the Holy Spirit as this spiritual force. You know, it's like kind of like God's presence, but I don't think of him as a person for some reason. I'm going to have you start reading John chapter 16, verses 1 through 6. But before you read it, understand that Jesus has just spent chapters 14 and 15 telling the disciples that he will be leaving them. Here they thought that he would always be with them, and now he says that he's leaving them, and he also warned them. He says, if the world hated me, then the world will hate you too. But he also said that they should share the gospel anyway. So read John chapter 16, verses 1 through 6. Why do you think the disciples were filled with grief while Jesus was talking to them? And has there ever been a time in your life when you could not concentrate on what God was trying to tell you because of a personal situation that was happening in your own life? Next, I want you to read John chapter 16, verse 7. How did Jesus reason that it was better for the disciples to have the Holy Spirit than to have Jesus in the flesh? And then make it personal. How is it better for us today that we have the Holy Spirit rather than Jesus in the flesh? You know, even as a pastor, there's moments where I'm just kind of like, man, I really wish I could have met Jesus in the flesh. Like, that would have been so cool. But the problem is that when our interaction, if our interaction with God was just through Jesus in the flesh, then we would be limited to space and time. We could only spend time with God when Jesus was around. But because our interaction with God is through the Holy Spirit, then we have unlimited access to God. It truly is better to have the Holy Spirit in our daily lives today. Next, I want you to read John chapter 16, verses 8 through 11. What is the Holy Spirit's role to the unsaved world according to these verses? And how will the Holy Spirit, accomplish this role? And finally, how did the Holy Spirit accomplish this role in your life? The Holy Spirit convicts the world of sin. In fact, that's exactly what the Holy Spirit did with us. When we say yes to Jesus, it's only because the Holy Spirit was working in our hearts to show us how sinful we were and how much we needed Jesus. Next, I want you to read John chapter 16, verses 13 through 15. According to these verses, what is one of the Holy Spirit's roles in our lives as believers? And how has the Holy Spirit done this for you? You know, sometimes I wonder if the disciples must have felt dumb around Jesus because he had all this knowledge and he had all this understanding and they didn't have that. Well, understand that through the Holy Spirit, Jesus has made these things available to us. How are we a part of the Holy Spirit's mission to the unsaved world? And when the Holy Spirit communicates with you, how do you sense his presence most clearly? You know, we're a part of the Holy Spirit's mission because he will give us the truth to tell the unsaved world. And the Holy Spirit uses us as part of the process of convicting the world of sin. We are supposed to be outspoken as believers in Jesus. So what can we do practically to begin to relate to the Holy Spirit as a person? In the very beginning, we talked about how for some of us, we think of the Holy Spirit as some sort of a force. But what can we do practically to begin to relate to Him as a person? And when you answer that question as a small group, I want you to close in prayer and ask the Holy Spirit to speak to you personally this next week. God bless you. Have a great rest of the small group, and we'll see you on Sunday.